Martin Hamilton was a feared gangland enforcer who began a reign of terror in Scotland's capital that left even hardened detectives sickened. We have covered many criminals and their terrible crimes, but few, if any, have committed as many vile offences as Martin Hamilton. Welcome back to Crime Chronicles. Stay tuned as we look at the life of Martin Hamilton, his list of truly vile crimes, and how he came to be found chopped to pieces in a remote woodland. Martin Hamilton, better known as the Black Hill Butcher, was a feared gangland enforcer and often cited as Scotland's most hated criminal. During his criminal career, Hamilton was regularly one of Scotland's most wanted men. His nickname, the Black Hill Butcher, came from the housing estate on which he operated in northeast Glasgow. Born in Maryhill, Glasgow, Hamilton was extremely close to his beloved mother, and later hated the thought she would learn of the heinous acts he was accused of. A source who knew Hamilton since his youth said, even as a teenager, Martin was feared and hated. Even his fellow school pupils would try to avoid him. If he was getting on the school bus, kids at the back would get out the emergency door. Martin was a gay man who hated his own sexuality and never seemed to come to terms with it. Apparently, he despised it being discussed. But during his criminal career, he regularly used his sexuality as a weapon. Hamilton wasn't considered a Mr. Big in Glasgow in the 90s. Dealing drugs and participating in an armed robbery was all pretty standard gangland stuff. Most of that city's gangsters gave Hamilton a wide berth due to his unpredictable and volatile nature. Standing only 5 foot 5 inches tall with a chubby frame, Hamilton cut a shambolic figure and was known for his frantic personality and his turbocharged talking at a mile a minute. Although he was on the police radar, he wasn't a well-known face. He had a number of criminal cases against him in Glasgow, but all collapsed due to the witnesses being afraid to testify. One source familiar with him at the time said, Martin was a lone wolf. He had some pals, but no strong allegiances to any particular gang. They went on to say, no one wanted to work with him. He was definitely Scotland's most hated criminal, probably because of the sexual abuse he was known for. He was a true psychopath. With his options in Glasgow running out, Hamilton set out for Edinburgh in the late 1990s, in a bid to muscle in on its thriving drug market. He focused on the west of the city, particularly areas such as Broomhouse, Westerhales and Sighthill. Detectives from the then Lothian and Borders Force admitted they knew little about Hamilton when he arrived in the capital, but a string of shocking assaults against low-level dealers who owed him money would bring Hamilton to their attention. In fact, his activities were so vile that police chiefs quickly put a surveillance team from their major crime unit on a round-the-clock watch. They discovered teenage dealers were supplied with heroin and ecstasy by Hamilton, but faced horrific retribution if they failed to deliver cash. Hamilton even became infatuated with one of his dealers, who was forced into hiding to escape his unwanted attention. Hamilton was a gay predator and would routinely sexually assault young men, sometimes at gunpoint, as punishment and to satisfy his perverted sexual appetites. He regularly abused and tortured his victims, aiming to strike fear into rivals as part of a plan to take over large parts of the city's drug trade. In one incident, one of Hamilton's minions cut off a young man's finger and tried to gouge out his eye with a teaspoon. Officers also identified an Edinburgh pub landlord who was targeted for extortion by Hamilton. Hamilton was so feared that the businessman said, I would rather pay him another £30,000 than give evidence against him. But Hamilton's downfall came when a teenage couple bravely stood up to him in court. The girlfriend and boyfriend were held captive for 11 hours in a flat in Anderston in Glasgow, during which they were scalded with boiling water and stabbed through the face by another co-accused. They were then forced to stand in a bath so they would not drip blood onto carpets. Their willingness to testify allowed detectives to revisit Hamilton's victims in Edinburgh, and some agreed to provide statements. For years he'd operated as a loose cannon, but finally, in 2000, he was arrested and ended up in court. The 6-week trial was held amid tight security in Inverness, as Hamilton had walked free from 12 previous High Court trials because witnesses were threatened. Those who testified were placed in police protection schemes. He was found guilty of 11 out of 14 charges involving the sale of drugs, abduction, assault and torture. Quite a list. Judge Lord Kingarth, who presided over the case, told Hamilton he took sadistic pleasure in the infliction of pain and the inspiration of real terror. The judge passed a life sentence with a minimum recommendation of 9 years. When he was jailed in 2000, Hamilton was described by a senior police officer as one of the most evil men he had ever come across in his service, possibly second only to child serial killer Robert Black. Hamilton allegedly abused prisoners while behind bars. One inside source said, the prison officers even used Martin as a bogeyman to keep other inmates in line. If anyone was getting out of order, they would say, behave, or they'd be put alone in a cell with Hamilton. Hamilton was eventually released from HMP shots in September of 2014, and quickly returned to his criminal ways. But by the following April, he had disappeared. An arrest warrant was issued after he breached parole conditions by failing to turn up at court. It seemed that the Black Hill Butcher had simply disappeared. And then, in December of 2015, the body of the sadistic criminal was found in a shallow grave in remote woodland near West Calder in West Lothian by a dog walker. The shallow grave didn't contain all of Martin Hamilton. He had been chopped into pieces by underworld rivals. Only his skull and some parts of his spine were recovered from the grim scene. Since his disappearance, detectives have been trying to establish his whereabouts. The post-mortem would reveal that Hamilton had suffered serious injuries and died soon after he was last seen, his body parts being undiscovered for over 6 months. Sources said that Martin got involved with a drug deal after being released. He had few other options because no one would work with him. He was too hot for everyone. But he got greedy and ripped the guy off. That's why he was killed. In March of 2017, the man accused of murdering Martin Hamilton was freed from jail because he was dying. Liverpool-born James Farrelly, 53, returned to his home and passed away a few days later. Although police believe Farrelly acted with others, no one else has been charged with Martin Hamilton's death. A psychologist was once called in to try to unravel the Black Hill Butcher's twisted mind while he was in custody. The expert called the task a poisoned chalice. It seems that no one mourned the death of Martin Hamilton. In fact, most people would say good riddance to this piece of human garbage. Thank you for joining us today on Crime Chronicles. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the channel with your friends.